Well, welcome back to the Tide Room Hangout. This is Mike, and today I want to talk to you about really expensive figures and some of the options that we have out there. Not options of what other figures to buy, because most of these, they're the best or the only. But I want to talk to you about, should you pay the high prices? Should you wait? Should you put yours up for sale? And of course, there's a whole lot of fuss in the community right now about several figures that are really hard to get. So I'm going to really shine some light on this. I'm going to give a different opinion that nobody has given, talking about this in a way nobody else talks about it. Coming up. So it really does seem like most people are after the Fans Toys figures. There's a lot of Fans Toys figures that were released early on, or heck, even a couple of years ago, that are sold out and hard to come by. Prices are going up. There's a lot of reasons why the prices are going up on these. There's a lot of reason why the demand is increasing. We're going to talk about all of that. We're going to discuss the value of these. What's the real true value of these things? We're also going to discuss the number of collectors, which makes a big difference. The number of collectors equals the number of demand, or the level of demand. So we're going to talk about that. And then, of course, we are going to discuss reissues and reissues alongside with other releases or other options or other things coming. And we're going to discuss the right and wrong way reissue should be done. But we're also going to discuss how it is going now, because that's really what matters the most. So let's get right into this, talking about values. So take a figure as Coot, Fans Toys Coot. That figure's going up in price. Kind of hard to find. People are charging, I don't know how much, $250, $300 for them now. That's a surprise to me, but it's not really. Every single one of these figures that shoots up in price sat on the market for a year or longer that didn't sell out. Coots even had a reissue, but I still don't believe Fans Toys, when they make them exactly the same, I don't think it's another production run. When Fans Toys put the exact same figure back out, and when we get to reissues, we'll talk about it. But he had a reissue, just saying for the Rarity. He looks exactly the same as the first run. I think they just made 5,000, only put 3,000 out in the beginning. That's really the kind of thing that Fans Toys does. And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't see, that's a good business practice in my mind. I don't have a problem with that whatsoever. But looking at this guy, price is shooting up, just like Tesla. So Tesla's price is through the roof. Now we know that there's supposed to be a 2.0 reissue coming, which we'll talk about that more here in a little bit. But whether or not there's a 2.0 reissue coming or not, or how far out it is, this figure's still expensive, and there's a lot of reason why. So I'm going to discuss this a little bit narrow and deep. And the first thing, that people are paying what everyone calls a late tax. So the late tax is basically whether you are new to the game and this is a rare, hard to find figure, you have to pay for it. Whether you were in the game and said, nah, I'll pass, I'll wait for something better, and 7 years later you're still waiting for something better. Hey, that's your choice. There's nothing wrong with that. But here is the first angle on this situation. If these rare, hard to find figures, let's say 1,000 collectors have a hole, there's a hole in their collection that could only be filled by you. Let's say there's 1,000 collectors all going for the same figure. And if everybody that sold it for MSRP when it first came out, and only 6 of them, if you look on eBay or whatever, most of these figures only have 3 or 6 of these rare ones, or hard to find ones. So those 6 will be gone in minutes, if not 30 minutes, right? If one of these expensive figures went on for $100 or $120, they'd be gone immediately, meaning that you're back in square one, except you don't have an option anymore. They've all sold out. So the 4 or 5 people that decided to sell theirs for whatever reason, those 4 or 5 or maybe 6 figures are gone instantly. Instead of sitting there with a high price, giving you an option to buy it, at least you have an option, right? Okay, understood. So what if the prices were so high? Let's say somebody sees that their Bad Cube Grump is selling for $150, $200 or something like that. Now, I only paid $60 for it. Well, first off, most people that are selling their figures aren't selling because they're just done collecting. They see the prices shot up and said, I could live without it, I'd rather have the money. That's where it is. So if the price isn't up there through the roof or something stupid ridiculous, nobody would be putting them up for sale. And here we go. you would not have an opportunity to buy it. So if these collectors that are putting their figures up for sale can only get MSRP out of it, they're just going to keep them. They're not going to even offer them up for sale. That is the way it is. That is the way the world works. I watch this over and over and over, how it plays out. Somebody puts a figure up for sale for $300. 6 people think you should be listing this for MSRP. That's not how the world works. That's not how the world works at all. I heard a stock market analogy to this. Are you putting your Apple shares up for what Apple was selling for 5 years ago? No, you're getting today's market value, today's price. And guess what? Nobody has to buy them. You can leave that hole in your shelf if you want to. So we're going to talk about that next. I have holes in my shelf. I have display holes, and I'm okay with it. They're intentional. I got rid of the DX9 Astro Train because in my heart of hearts, I knew something better was coming along. And it took a year, so I'll be sitting with a year and a half with no Astro Train in my collection, but it doesn't really hurt me that much because I'm looking forward to Thomas coming out. Same thing with Seekers. I only have a couple of Seekers, so I don't have all of the Seekers out there in the world. But with that, I'm going to wait on reissues of Make Toys. If they don't reissue theirs, I'll see what Takara does. But I'm kind of Seekered out, so for me, I don't have to have every color Seeker, but I do kind of want the main 3, right? And like Fans Toys Lupus. Now, I'm not the guy that joined late, started collecting late, and just couldn't get it. I intentionally passed on it. I just didn't think I cared about going that deep. I really wanted to dial up my first and second seasons and then work a little bit on season 3. I didn't even think I'd get into season 3, let alone this guy. But now that I've dialed out so much, I'm going, I'll probably need some of these Headmasters. I need to get all of these. And so there I am. It's my fault. I passed on it. But now in my mind, I refuse to pay $300 for this guy, or however much it's going for now. But if I wanted to pony up $300, there's one up there for sale. If everybody put Lupus up tomorrow that was planning on selling it for whatever reason for $100 or $120, there would be no options for me. So next I want to talk about the size of the market, of the collector market, how many collectors are out there. Of course, there's no data saying there are exactly 243,000 collectors, which, by the way, that's overstating it, but there's not any data about that. But you do know that mainline Chug production is massively higher than Masterpiece. When you look at it, they produce in the hundreds of thousands up to 1 million of a figure versus the Masterpiece line. There's, of course, production number rumors, but I listen every time I get any information about production numbers. It sounds like they run at least 1,000 of each production run on the third party and Masterpiece, up to 5,000. Very seldom do I hear of anything higher than 5,000, somewhere in that range. Generally, it makes more sense 2,000 at the low end. But when you look at the difference in the number of production of these, we're actually collecting some really highly rare figures, really highly rare collectibles, meaning rare as in there are just not very many in existence in comparison to, say, the main line. Now, I really think Legends figures are a completely different story. I think when it comes to Legends figures that they do the smallest production runs ever. In fact, the low runs on these Legends figures are because I think there's the least number of collectors collecting Legends. There's nothing wrong with that or bad about that, but it's such a niche market for such a tiny little Transformer. And way they get their money out of this is every single Legends figure has a multitude of repaints. And yeah, Masterpiece has repaints. We see that. But these repaints that we see in the Legends are ridiculous. There's 6 and 7 repaints of the same figure over and over and over, but there's always at least 3 if you watch. So what does all that matter? That matters because we talk about the law of demand. When it comes to demand, that is why the price goes high or the price goes low. When you're looking at the demand is there. There's 1,000 people looking for the same figures, 1,000 people that want them, and with that demand comes a higher price. Look at the other end of the spectrum. Who really cares about iGear's gears? That figure, you could get that for less than they were originally selling them for. And Toy World's Cup. Now, Toy World's Cup's not selling for dirt cheap, but he's still not very expensive. Toy World's Crank is an example of a figure that there's really not an abundance of on the market. It's kind of actually hard to get your hands on, but it doesn't command a very big price because when it does come up for sale, nobody's after it. Unlike, say, Bad Cube's Huffer, that figure's commanding a price. Heck, that figure is so hard to get that it barely ever shows up on eBay or in groups. So it's a really hard figure to get. Okay, so for those of you who missed out on all the figures the first run, those of you like me that intentionally passed on a few figures, well, guess what? We have reissues. And there's issues with reissues, and I'm going to talk about how it should go. The reality of this is, when X Transbots does a reissue, they allegedly do improvements. So your first 1.0 figure is now inferior because now they've got die-cast in it where there wasn't die-cast, more paint, and fixed some tolerance issues. But on the other hand, I would feel kind of upset if they knew there's problems and they never fixed them. So it's a double-edged sword that we deal with every time they do a reissue, and they improve that reissue. Also going along with reissues are, well, new figures coming out. So if you've held off and you're waiting for maybe a new company to have their take on a particular character that you don't have in your collection, see, that is kind of something that I've done. And that's something a lot of collectors do. And you have the right to do whatever you want. But the reality of this is, let's say people pass on the Fans Toys version of their Dune Rider or whatever they're calling this thing, and then Arcos is sold out and this is sold out. You see, I could see a scenario where that could happen here in about a year. And then you got a bunch of collectors back to square one, right? I think when it comes to reissues, I think Fans Toys has figured it out. Fans Toys is doing the right thing. Maybe. We're going to talk about that. When they reissue a figure, they color it differently. I really think their first figure they put out looks great and more or less nails it, right? But then they recolor it and kind of looks a little bit better, depending on, your own taste, your own preferences. In the case of this Quiet as T, I like it better. I have both. And I'm not the guy that's sitting there saying, well, just because I have the T, I like it better. Or because I have the first one, didn't want to buy the T, I like the first one better. I mean, there's a lot of people that are going to say that, and they're going to act like that. So someone truly who owns both, I don't have any skin in the game either way to say one is better than the other or worse than the other. It doesn't help me or hurt me because I have them both. And I do like Quiet as T better, and I like the coloration of them better. And thus, maybe for me personally, I like the purple more than the blue. Other people actually do like the blue, but they are giving you different figure. It's a different coloration. And I think that's the route that they should keep going. And even for people like me that say, hey, I kind of want more than one of this character. So I could have, 4 swoops also. So it wouldn't bother me. I could have a couple, 2, 3 of this guy. I've been debating whether or not I try to pick up a Fans Toys Phoenix X before they become impossibly expensive. And I've already overspent on my first Phoenix, and I passed on this guy at $260, which I should have got him when he first came out, but I don't know why I passed on him. But I'm starting to think I might want to pick him up because it's one of my favorite characters. And Fans Toys is reissuing their Road King. You're saying, well, Mike, you're wrong because they're putting out Road King. No, I'm not wrong. They only put out a fraction of the ones that they produced. And I was like, well, why are they doing a second production run when most of the retailers aren't even sold out yet? Only a few are. Because it's not another production run. It's just more stock they've held back. And it's a practice that they've done for a while. There's nothing wrong with it. In fact, it's smart business. But I think when it comes to these combiners that they're holding back a bit extra, they might do a box set. I don't have any proof of that. But seeing Road King get put out like more quantity recently or coming up or whatever, I can see that happening. So the last thing I want to talk about is no matter who you are, if you are collecting something and you find out stuff that you've been collecting is becoming more valuable, if you know in the back of your mind, if I go to sell these figures, I could make double what I paid on them, even if you have absolutely zero intention of selling them, it makes you feel good about your collection. On the flip side, if you just spent $20,000 on figures and you break it down, you can't even get $5,000 off on the secondary market. that's going to kind of make you feel a little unsettled, even though you don't ever plan on selling them. It's just human nature. Human nature knowing that, hey, I got this stuff and it's worth this, that, and another. Even though you don't collect for value or you don't collect for worth, value is still a component, and it has to do with human nature. It has to do with living in the real world, because that's part of it. So next time you're engaged in one of those wonderful, intelligent conversations, or online in forums or whatever, talking about how these figures just cost too much, or why are these people asking so much, you have a little bit more ammunition for a discussion and a little bit better understanding of how the actual market works. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, and Titanium Hanger out.